Holy Spirit, one God, amen. So I'd like to just open with a quick video before we jump into this week's talk.
Hey, my mom just canceled my brother's World War account and his apple. What? Holy God.
No, he's not possessed. So Stephen, there's 77 million hits on this YouTube video. If you haven't seen it, enjoy. So Stephen got really angry because his mother canceled his World of Warcraft account. Okay, you can tell not much into video games. And so the guy, as his brother said, freaked out and completely lost it. Anger is one of the most destructive forces in the human heart. Well, we don't want any more. All right, let's get out of there. So some people, when they get angry, they become yellers, ragers, door slammers. Okay, and you've got to be aware of those people, because when they get frequently angry, things can get destroyed. To me, anger is not just a disease for the spiritual heart, but it's also can affect the physical heart, and we're going to talk about that. We've got some doctors in here, I'm sure, that will be able to tell us on some of how it is that anger affects the physical heart as well as the spiritual heart. In the 1990s, there's a doctor, his name is Dr. Middleman, who's from Harvard, the Institute for Prevention of Cardiovascular Disease at Harvard. And he did a study, and he found that anger was one of the common triggers for heart attacks. Okay? So anger is not just a spiritual issue, it also has physical consequences as well. You know that when you get angry, your body contracts, right? It jerks up. You get sick in your stomach, right? So it has physical implications as well as spiritual ones. Some of the problems that are affected physically, when you get angry, you get high blood pressure, you get heart attacks, anxiety, depression, pain, abdominal pain, skin diseases or skin eczema, insomnia. You can get all sorts of physical complications when we get angry, okay? Remember we said earlier that the human person is a body and a soul. What happens in my soul affects my body, okay? What happens in my body sometimes affects my soul, okay? But we've got to understand that what's going on the inside actually has some really strong implications on what happens on the outside. If last week we said guilt meant I owe you, when I feel guilty about something, it's because I feel like I owe you something. Anger says what? You owe me. Okay? So this week we're going to be talking about anger as you owe me something. Okay? Or someone else owes you something. The root of anger comes from the perception that something has been taken and that you are owed something, okay? So, if you take someone's reputation, you owe them something. You owe them their reputation. If you gossip about someone, you've taken their reputation, right? So that they become angry with you. If you've robbed someone of their purity, you've taken that from them, and now they become angry. At work, if you feel like you've been doing a faithful job and your boss owes you a raise, oftentimes you become angry. So last week, For those of you here, you remember, we spoke about the guy who ran off with a new woman, a new wife, leaving his wife and his children behind. And what happened when he left it and he ran off with this new woman is he felt a sense of guilt towards his wife and his children, and probably more likely his children. Well, the flip side of it is his wife and his children experienced something called anger. Okay? Why? Because he took something from them. He owed them something. He owed her his first, he took from her her first marriage. For his children, he stole from them holidays. He stole from them security. He stole from them a sense of family. So there was now anger has been created because they've been hurt and they've been owed something by their father. I want to talk to you about a couple of unhelpful ways to deal with anger. Okay, some unhelpful ways that we deal with anger. First one is anger repression. Okay? Anger repression, and we've heard this growing up, like just keep it inside. Some of us keep it inside so much that we physically start shaking, right? It's so angry and we start shaking because we repress it, we hold it inside for years and years and years, and what usually happens after that? Explode, okay? And then we repress it again, repress, hold it in, and then we explode, okay? We've been told, or I've been told growing up, good Christian people, they don't express anger, okay? They don't let it out. And so we've been taught, or I was taught, that it's an inappropriate or bad emotion. I need to keep it inside and never express my anger because I have to be a good Christian. And so I keep it bottled up until I explode. The other one, some of us are compulsive explosioners, all right? So the other unhealthy way of dealing with it is just always exploding. Every time something happens, we just burst, we erupt, we let it out, okay? And we'll talk about in a little bit what some people with anger, you never want to be around them. You know some people, they're angry people, okay? At least that's what they will claim. So, anger explosions, some people have very limited control over their anger, and they explode into rages at the drop of a hat, okay? So these are two really, really unhealthy ways. These are extremes. One side says, I'm not saying anything. The other side says, anytime there's a chance to say something, I'm going to say something. One side says, something happens, I'm just going to keep it in. The other side says, you look at me the wrong way, I'm gonna like take a baseball bat to you, okay? The second one, some of my friends, okay, our circle growing up, if you looked at us the wrong way, if you looked at, one of my friends the wrong way, it was going to be bad news, okay? Anger issues. Anger oftentimes comes because we feel like we're not getting what we want, okay? We're not getting what we want, or we're not getting what we think we deserve. If you're at work and you've been promised a raise and you don't get it, and your boss promised you're going to get a raise, and let's take it one step further, he goes behind your back and seeks the promotion that he told you, he was telling you that you were going to be perfect for. Why do you get angry? Because something was taken from you that you felt you deserved. Now, I'm not saying that you didn't deserve it, or it wasn't promised to you, or that you don't have a right to be angry because he dealt with you like without sincerity, without truthfulness. But this is where anger comes from. We expect that we're going to have something, we don't get it, and we lose it. So we were going out one time to Starbucks, a group of us, and it was during the fast, and of course during the fast, like when we go to Starbucks, everyone's soy chai latte or soy whatever, everything's soy, okay? We're going to spend like $7 on a Starbucks, but we're getting it soy, right? So I got my soy chai latte, was enjoying it, guy right behind me, he ordered out of soy. The guy exploded, okay? He's like, what do you mean? I want my soy. He's like, Abuna's here, I can't order a 2%. Like, what? It's a fasting day, right? Obviously, he got the fast and the whole thing mixed up, okay? But when we don't get what we want, oftentimes we explode, or what we feel like we deserve. And so, a lot of us think payback is like the way to go, okay? If we don't get what we want, we're going to get the person back. If someone gossips about me, what I'm going to do, I'm going to take them down, okay? I'm going to tear them apart. You look at me the wrong way, I'm going to make sure everyone looks at you the wrong way, okay? My boss promised me a raise, he didn't get it for me, I'm going to make sure this guy gets his job, he gets fired, he loses his job, okay? You have no idea how many people who have been hurt, and their plan of action is payback. The problem is, with anger, the issue is that for most of us, this perceived debt that's been created, what we think we deserve, or what is owed to us, can never really be paid back. If a man leaves his family, how can he fix what he's done? He's already taken away years of his family's life. If a guy or a girl takes a purity from a girl, how can that be paid back? How can that be given back? It can't. Oftentimes, and we're going to see in one of the parables when Jesus speaks about forgiveness, one of the parables he actually very clearly says that payback, like, it doesn't fix things. Okay? Getting back at the person doesn't fix the problem. This is a tragic, tragic issue because a lot of people, they sit around waiting for payback. And they are unable to move on until they get back at the person. Or until the person pays them back for what they deserve or they believe they're owed or that they deserve. The biggest challenge is that some of us have been so hurt that at the drop of any little hint of someone owed us something, or we didn't get it exactly the way we wanted, or we thought it was owed to us, or that we deserved to have it, explode. And some of these people, it's epidemic. Okay? They become equal opportunity attackers. Okay? Doesn't matter who's in front of them. They're going to tear them apart. Okay? These are like the people that we say, oh, he's just angry, man, or she's just angry. He's an angry person. Okay? Why? Because it doesn't matter who's in front of them, they're going to tear them apart. Some of us have people in our lives, especially around the holiday season. Okay? Have you ever heard, anyone here know this expression in Arabic? It's Samamin Naked. Okay? Samamin Naked means like they need like misery. They have to. I know people who know people who know people who know people who every single holiday someone had to make like a fight. Someone had to get angry and explode. It wasn't a celebration until someone picked a fight. It wasn't. It wasn't. Like they had to get angry at someone, slam the door, run out of the house, pick a fight, had to. Okay? And some people, it just doesn't matter. They're just angry at everyone. They're always fighting with someone. Okay? These are the equal opportunity Avengers. Anyone looks at them the wrong way, they're just going to explode. These are the extremely angry people. And the problem with these people is you'll never get your way. Never. No matter what you do. And they'll tear you apart and you're like, dude, what did I do? What happened? You have no idea. I know someone, every time like I'm around, the person just angry. Like, what happened? And I'll ask people like, what happened? They're like, I don't know. These are really complicated people to be around. And maybe we're those people. I want you to turn it around. If you're not sure, I want you to ask the closest people to you. Okay? Now, if they hesitate to answer the question, that's probably a good indication. And you're going to be like, what do they have to be angry about, man? It's really important. Like, if you already know what they're going to say, don't ask. Okay? But I promise you, if you ask the people that are closest to you, and if you find yourself wanting to walk away from them while they're responding to you, or create responses or get defensive, listen to what's going on inside, okay? You might keep your mouth shut, but you might feel like inside you want to pick up the stapler and throw it through their body, okay? Listen to what's going on inside. Listen, because that's telling you something. Something is going on in your soul, okay? Something's going on in that lower soul that we were talking about earlier, okay? Something's going on in there. Yipsiki, it's all messed up. And that's what we need to get fixed, all right? Every one of us has a story to tell. Every one of us at some point has been owed something. Now, some of us, we just, as I mentioned earlier, we keep our story bottled up. We'll never tell anyone anything about anything, okay? And we've been so hurt that we are going to keep it hidden inside. This is different from guilt, where we spoke about confession. I want to tell you that, and I shared a little bit with some of you guys, when I was a little boy, some really, really heinous things happened to me. And it wasn't until I began to talk about my story and explore what was going on inside that I was able to begin dealing with what was happening inside, okay? I know a young woman that I counseled who was sexually abused by a close family member of hers. And it wasn't until 25 years later, after marriage and children, that she finally began to explore her story and what was going on inside, and she was able to begin dealing with the anger. Okay? Some of us have our story, and we use it all the time. Any opportunity we find to tell our story, we're going to tell it. And we use it as our crutch as to why we're angry. And why we steamroll through people. We don't just tell our story as an explanation for our behavior, but rather as a justification for our behavior. Okay? Some people say, well, you don't know what happened to me. And that, you don't know what happened to me, becomes the reason why they're going to continue to plow through people's lives. They're going to continue to destroy people. They're going to continue to yell at people. I want to suggest that at least half of us are deeply wounded and probably have never dealt with it. And have a lot of anger going on inside. And maybe some of y'all are really angry right now at what we're talking about. Okay? But what I'd like to suggest to you is that you need to decide to get free and get rid of your crutches. And part of that means that we deal with the anger. Part of that means that we begin to find healing from what was done to us and what we feel like we are owed. Your story explains your behavior, but it doesn't excuse it. And we need to be sure of that. What happened to me when I was younger explained why when I got a little bit older, I was behaving the way that I was, but it doesn't excuse my behavior. It doesn't excuse the way that I treated people. So today we want to talk about how to deal with anger. We want to oppose the anger. We want to work through it. I think this is the most obvious and destructive heart disease. Of the four that we're going to talk about, guilt, greed, jealousy, and anger, I think this is the most destructive one. I also think this is the easiest one to deal with. Okay? When unbridled, angry people can leave a trail of destruction. We've been around it. We've been around it. So the remedy for anger is knock it through people, right? Just plow through people, beat them down. Not exactly. What's the remedy for anger? How do we deal with anger? If guilt, the remedy is confession. Anger, the remedy is, anyone?
Forgiveness.
Forgiveness. It's forgiven. Now, that's no surprise. I think if you're making the connections now, this should come pretty clearly. And you say, that's good, that's wonderful. But this isn't as easy as it sounds, right? Duh, forgiveness. Okay, good. But how? Okay? What is forgiveness and how to forgive? I think forgiveness is probably one of the most misunderstood words that we deal with. Okay? People say, well, I've forgiven them. Or I'm not sure if I've forgiven them. Or what does it mean that I forgive him? Or how often do I need to forgive him? And what does it mean if I forgive him, do I need to also forgive him? All this stuff, okay? So if the remedy for anger is forgiveness, we want to jump in because there's a lot of confusion. 3 kinds of people who usually, when they're angry, how they deal with it, okay? So the first kind of person says, I know I should forgive, but I don't have the courage to forgive. I don't know if it has what it takes to forgive. I can't muster up the courage to let go of what was done to me. And trust me, this requires courage. It requires courage to walk away from the crutch that we've been leaning on. The second kind of person, is we feel like some of us that we can't let off the person too easy. That if I forgive them, I'm letting them off too easy. They made me suffer, I gotta make them suffer. It's their turn. Payback. Okay? I shared with you all a few weeks back, when my uncle back in 1996 was shot and killed, the last thing I wanted to do was forgive him. And forgive the people that I didn't even know who did it. And I still to this day don't know who did it. I felt like, and someone told me, I gotta forgive him. You know what I wanted to do to that person? I wanted to punch him, exactly. I wanted to throw him out the window, okay? I felt if I forgive those people, I can't let them off too easy. I want to find those people, and I want to do to them what they did to my uncle. The third kind of person is they're trying, but their feelings keep coming back. It's like they want to forgive, they think they've forgiven, but the feelings keep coming back, and they can't figure out, if the feelings come back, does that really mean that I've forgiven the other person? Let's jump into Scripture. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 31 to 32, St. Paul says, let all bitterness, wrath, anger, clamor, evil speaking be put away from you. With all malice, and be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, even as God in Christ forgave you. Okay? He says, put away from you all anger, all malice. Every kind. He says, in that first section, he says, bitterness, wrath, anger, clamor, and evil speaking. He says, listen, if I've forgotten anything, all malice, everything. Anything that I may have forgotten. The word put away comes from this idea of walking into a spider web. Okay? Anyone ever walked into a spider web? All right. So this is usually what you do when you walk into a spider web. So that's what we look like when we walk into a spider web, right? We want to do everything possible to get it off. And that's exactly what St. Paul tells us. He says, put away all of this. Literally take it off, strip it off yourself. This is the word imagery that he's giving us when he says, put away all. Okay? Put it away. You walk into this nasty spider web, and this is exactly what anger and malice and envy and bitterness is like. It's like this spider web that gets on you, and it makes you feel nasty, and he's saying, put it off. Literally take it off, every part of it, get rid of it. Put it off. The key word here is all. All. Put away all of it. Even that one little thing that you're holding back, that little crutch, that one thing you're like, I can forgive everything, but not that one thing. When I was younger, some of the boys from church used to pick on me quite often. Okay? I was the little guy at the time. And so I was the little guy that was really awkward and had the crazy ears. Right? I mean, I got all kinds of funny things were said about me. And growing up, like, I was able to forgive everything except for those boys. Those boys, like, that was the one thing at the time in church that I couldn't let go of. And St. Paul says, put away all of it. All of it. Every part of it. Tear it off like a spider web. Get rid of it. Because so long as we hold on to that negative feeling, that malice towards a person or a group of people, a religious group, a group who have done a heinous crime, a racial group, so long as we have that anger, that hatred towards them, that's going to continue to fester in our souls. And that's going to affect our relationship not only with God, but with others. Because we as people are communal. And I speak this knowing that some of you have lived in Egypt and have been a persecuted people. And St. Paul says, put it all away. If there's one person who we can listen to, you can say, like, that's pretty insensitive of him. But if there's one person that we can listen to, this is Paul the Apostle. Paul the Apostle wrote these words while sitting in prison in Rome for over a year, waiting to be tried. And he says, put all malice away. Put all anger away. He didn't write this from the beaches of Florida. He wrote this from a prison cell. He wasn't sitting on a resort. He wasn't hanging out in Princeton. He was in prison. And by the way he was in prison, like, it wasn't his fault. He was there innocently. And yet he says, put away all envy, all anger, all bitterness, all wrath, all kinds of malice, put it away. If there's one of the apostles that you can look to, say, this guy we can listen to, I think Paul the Apostle, in his condition, his experience can tell us something. And he actually tells us a really important part of the formula. Okay? The secret formula for putting that away, he tells us, is forgiving one another. The only way I can get rid of anger is by forgiveness. The only way I can let go is through forgiveness. Forgiveness is what enables us to let go of what was done to us. What's the key words? Key words. Even as. You got some smart people in here, all right? So even as is the key word. So we can only forgive even as Christ forgave us in God, or God in Christ forgave you. Okay? He said our forgiveness is likened to the forgiveness that God had towards us in Christ. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses. Lead us not into temptation. That's how it goes, right? Forgive us our trespasses
as we forgive
those who trespass against us. As. There's a likeness there. Okay? Forgiveness is two ways. Okay? So our forgiveness hinges on our forgiveness. Which way? You call it. It's both ways. Okay? So we're called to forgive one another, even as God in Christ forgave you. Even as redefines the whole idea of forgiveness. He's not saying just forgive because it'll make you feel good. This isn't self-help, guys. This isn't about like feeling good about yourself. It's not about walking out of here and saying, man, I feel so much better. It's about growing into the likeness of Christ. We as Christians, we're not looking, I'm not sending you out of here so you can say, man, I want to be a good person. I want to learn how to do good things so I can be successful in this world. I want to send you out of here becoming more and more like Christ. Because that's exactly what we're called as Christians to become. We're called to be Christ in this world. And the only way that can happen is when I take my will and I put it in the hands of God's grace, and I let them work together. For my ability to forgive others, by the way, hinges on my experiencing of His forgiveness to me. So St. Peter asks a really important question. Anyone remember the question that St. Peter asked in the Gospel of Matthew? About forgiveness?
How many times?
How many times? Are there limits? What if the same shady person keeps on doing the same thing to me? Peter came to Jesus and asked, Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother or sister who sins against me? Up to 7 times? And St. Peter at this point is probably feeling good. Because there was likely a time where he would have said like 1 time or 2 times. And so he says, man, 7 times. And I'm sure he was waiting for Jesus to come and pat him on his back and say, that's my point. Jesus answered and said, I tell you not 7 times, but 77 times. He says, beyond what you can imagine. And before Peter can respond, Jesus jumps in to one of his parables. Therefore the kingdom of heaven is like a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. As he began the settlement, a man who owed him 10,000 bags of gold was brought to him. Since he was not able to pay, the master ordered that he and his wife and his children and all that he had be sold to repay the debt. At this time, the servant fell on his knees before him. Be patient with me, he begged, and I will pay everything back. The servant's master took pity on him, canceled the debt, and let him go. Forgiveness, the essence of forgiveness is canceling something that's been owed to you. There was a lot that the king was owed by this servant. A lot. Okay? And the king said, I'm forgiving all this. I'm letting it go. You owe it to me. By the way, if the king would have left the servant in jail, him and his family, what would he have gotten back? What if he would have sold them in slavery? How much would he have gotten? Guess. 120 pieces, like 30 pieces of silver for a slave. Let's say he sold them in slavery, every one of them. If he had 2.5 kids, the American dream, he would have gotten 132.5 pieces of silver. Okay? He would have gotten nothing compared to what he was owed. Verse 28, but when the servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 silver coins. He grabbed him and began to choke him. Pay back what you owe me, he demanded. His fellow servant fell to his knees and begged him, be patient with me, and I will pay it back. The servant is in a position to return the favor. Right? He's in the same position as he was, like this servant is now in the same position that he was just in. Verse 30 says he refused and said he went off and had the man thrown into prison until he could pay the debt. When the other servants saw that, what happened, they were outraged and went and told their master everything that had happened. First servant owed a bunch of money. King says, I forgive you. Second guy, he owed like pennies compared. And he says, give me what you owe me. Why? I think the first servant didn't understand what it meant that he was forgiven. He didn't grasp this idea of forgiveness. He didn't. If he would have, I think he would have dealt radically different with the second servant. Verse 32. The master called the servant in. You wicked servant, he said, I canceled all the debt of yours because you begged me to. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant just as I had on you? In anger, his master handed him over to the jailers to be tortured until he should pay back all he owed. This is how my heavenly Father will treat each of you unless you forgive your brother or sister from your heart. I think it's clear at this point. If St. Peter didn't have an idea what Jesus was talking about initially, he got it now. At this point, what's clear is that this second servant is anyone that you or I are holding anything against. The second servant, the servant who owes like pennies, anyone that you or I have anger in our hearts towards, that's who that second servant is. Okay? How are we going to be treated? This is how we'll be treated. He says, you're going to be taken and you're going to be tortured. Now, I don't know if literally he means like this is going to be, there's a physical place he's going to throw us to. Okay? But what I know for sure is we will experience something called hell. Okay? Whether it's a literal hell that we're going to go to, or it's an experience of hell, I guarantee you, when we harbor anger in our hearts towards another person or a group of people, we experience something called hell inside of us. Okay? Hell is the place where God is not. Okay? Or we don't experience, rather, let me say it differently, where we can't experience the love of God. Okay? So there is no place that God doesn't exist. But in hell, what happens is we turn our backs to God. So God continues to love, but we can't experience that love. He continues to be who he is, but we don't experience the warmth and the love and the light of God. And so what happens is when I hold anger in my heart towards another person, it removes me from being able to experience that love of God. And I read an article in one of the newspapers. It was suggesting that forgiveness, in many ways, is for the forgiver. Because when I forgive, I get rid of this experience of hell inside of me. The torture that's going on in my heart, I let go of. I'm no longer in that place. And let me just say one more thing on this point. This right here, I think this is multi-generational. When I become an angry person, and I have anger in my heart, we pass this on. We pass this on to others because if you remember what we talked about 2 weeks ago, we said that hurt people hurt people. And so when I hurt another person as an angry person, what's going to happen is that person is going to get angry. And that might be my child. And that child is going to grow up with anger in their hearts. And that hurt person is going to hurt other people. So hurt people who hurt people. Are y'all following? Okay. So we'd like to complete the cycle of forgiveness, and I want to spend the last 5 minutes here before we go to questions or comments, talking about how do we get to this place of forgiveness. What does it mean that I can complete the cycle of forgiveness? I'd like to suggest that we don't forgive because the other person deserves it. If we forgive because the other person deserves forgiveness, we'll never forgive. Did the king forgive the servant because he deserved to be forgiven? He forgave because that's who he is. Because God forgives. And so he calls us to be like him. He says, you don't forgive others because they deserve forgiveness. You forgive others because you're my disciples. Because that's who we are. Christ forgave. And if you and I have been anointed with his Spirit, that makes us little Christs in the world. That makes us his image in the world. So we don't forgive because the person, okay, well maybe they're a good person. Maybe they didn't mean it. Maybe, and we find a reason. He says, no. You forgive the person because that's who you are. We also forgive the person not because of what was done to us, but importantly what was done for us. When we look to the cross of Christ, the place of forgiveness, I hope this is a reminder for us of what it means to be forgiven. Okay? Forgiveness is not described as a feeling, but as a decision. God wasn't chilling in heaven one day and says, I feel like forgiving them. I feel forgiveness towards them. And he left it at that. I feel forgiveness for them. Forgiveness was a decision and an action, right? In the same way that love is not a feeling, and I know some of you romantics that'll bother you, but love is an action. It's a decision. Okay? When I love my wife, I decide and I act in love towards her. Forgiveness is the same way. Forgiveness, I choose to make a decision to forgive. It's an action. Okay? So how to complete the cycle of forgiveness? Okay? First thing I'd like to invite you to do is make a list. Okay? I want you to identify the people who you are angry with. When you hear their voice, you cringe. When you just hear their name, you hear someone's name that sounds like their name, blood starts rushing to your head, and you start feeling heart palpitations. Make a list of anyone who you are angry with. Some of us would rather forget. I think if you forget, it's still there. So make your list, find out who it is that you would love to see fail, that you would love if they got fired, or when they're walking across on graduation day that they would trip and fall on the stage and be embarrassed and everyone would laugh at them. Make a list of the people who you are angry with. The second step, I think, is one of the most important steps because it's a part that most of us skip. So most of us have talked about the first part, and then we go to part 3. The second part is really important, and it's actually, we find it in the parable that we just read. Determine what they owe you. So this person who you're angry with, what is it that they owe you? Do they owe you an apology? Do they owe you a public confession? Do they owe you money? Do they owe you truth? What do they owe you? What have they taken from you that you feel that they deserve? What could they do to fix the problem? With the king, he said, this servant owes me 10,000 denarii, right? He knew the servant, he knew what was owed to him. Okay? So the second thing is, identify and determine what it is that they owe you. If they did this second step, it would make everything better. I asked someone to do this once, and I said, what would it be like for this person, like, to pay you back? And they said, what this person would have to do is to go on Facebook and publicly post that they defamed my name and that they were a big fat liar and that everything that they said about me was not true. And they kind of the list went on, okay? So determine what it is that you feel the person owes you. And this third step, what did the king do next? What did the king do after he determined what was owed? He canceled the debt. He decided to forgive him. Guys, this is a decision that we have to make. Pull out your calendar, pull out your smartphones, pick a day, and decide you're going to forgive the person. Okay? Whatever it is that this person owes you, you decide you're not getting paid back. And you decide to release the offender. You decide to say, this person, because I am a child of God and I'm supposed to be Christ in this world, I'm forgiving this person for what they've done to me that they can never pay me back for. I promise you guys, if you sit around waiting for payback, it's a tragedy because you're never going to get paid back. And most people spend years, sometimes decades of their life, waiting for payback that they never receive. Okay? So decide to release the offender. For some of you who have been offended years ago, some of you, so someone told me one time that they were sodomized at the age of 7. They said, I don't even know if the person's still alive. Sometimes what helps with this third step is to do something physical. Okay? So write something down, write it down, and burn it. Write it down, bury it in the ground. I had one woman tell me recently that her perpetrator died 5 years ago. So what she did was she took a chair and 2 other chairs, one for Christ and one for the guy, her perpetrator, and she literally sat down and spoke to the person, said, I feel like you owe me this, and I am deciding to forgive you and to let go. And she got up and walked out of the room. She said, I was done. It was done. For the common things that happen on a day-to-day basis, oftentimes it's just, we don't have to do something physical like that. Okay? One person said that they chose to nail a list to the cross as a reminder for them of what was done to them and what was done for them. And the fourth and final thing is you restate your decision, because there will come a time where this will come back to you. And remember that group of people who said, I think I forgave, but the feelings keep coming back. Every so often, you're going to be driving down the road, you're going to see something, you're going to see a billboard, that part of the word has part of their name in it, and it's going to trigger something, and it's going to remind you of that person, what they did to you, and feelings are going to begin to come back. And in that moment, you restate your decision. You restate, this person is forgiven, this is closed. Okay? You restate it. Don't let your emotions trick you. Remember what we said 2 weeks ago? We said that if our will is here in the middle, and our emotions are here, and our intellect is here, and our emotions are pulling us back and forth with our mind, our intellect, we got it all backwards. So we need to take our will, our heart, connect it to Christ, and have our will move our emotions and our intellect. Okay? You restate your decision that this person is free. I'm done with this. I've forgiven this person. I've moved on from this. Every so often, when I see the bullies picking on the little kids, it reminds me of what was done. I have to restate my decision, like, these people are forgiven. I moved on, okay? I'm called to be Christ, and I'm called to bear His love and His forgiveness to others, just as He's forgiven me. Last thing I want to say is make it a habit. Make it a habit. Just like we said last week with guilt, confession, we need to make a habit. This isn't a one-time thing, okay? We don't do it one and done. No, we make it a habit, okay? Learn to live a life of forgiveness. The little and the big, okay? The little and the big. Some things, guys, are just not in your control. And we need to make it a habit of forgiving and letting go when those things happen to us. Otherwise, these things will cause blockages in our spiritual heart. For those of you who were not here last week, the question was asked the week before, how do I know if this is something that I'm struggling with? And what I would suggest to you is this. If you've heard something today that made you angry, listen to what's inside. If something inside of you made you uncomfortable today, then perhaps God is telling you something. Okay? Next week, or not next week, in 2 weeks, we're going to continue with resisting greed, with a 1-week break as we discussed. And then we will wrap up the week after that with jealousy, okay? We'll stop there with questions. Glory to God for everyone.